ready to do the final part of the DNA project, which is plating out your transformants and controls onto Petri dishes. To give you some practice with this, you first start with the practice plate. And that's really useful just to get you the sense of using your pipetter and getting some cells onto the plate. So you want to take your practice plate, turn it over, auger side up, and get your handy dandy ruler, which is just a piece of cardboard, and draw a few lines on your practice plate. On your regular plate you're going to have 8 lines, but here you can just do a couple. You can label them 1, 2, etc. Now we're going to be plating 15 microliters of cells, in this case for the practice just water, in each of those places. So you take your P20 and dial it, get your tip right on there. You've pre-dialed it to 15 microliters, and we're going to practice, like I said, with some water. Grab your microfuge tube of water, or whatever you have of water on your bench. Take out 15 microliters, and with the auger side down, you are going to spot that 15 microliters on several little spots along that first part. 3 spots, dispense it completely. Now to get that evenly spread over that section, you are going to grab a sterile toothpick. It's okay if the top comes off inadvertently. You got to get it off to get the toothpick out. Grab the toothpick, put the top back on to keep things sterile. Not easy. And then take that toothpick and gently, because the auger is soft, spread your 3 little spots widely across that area. Perfect. You can do this practice as many times as you want. Oh yes, the discard of the toothpick goes in that little beaker, not back in the sterile toothpicks. That would be a mess. Great, so you can do that practice as many times as you want, as I said, and now we go to the real deal. And let's just try that again. You've got an MT plate and a T plate. And this is, we've got the T plate there. You're gonna take 15 microliters of your cells. You've got 8 samples. Let's start with sample 1. I see that's sample 2. Let's just go back to sample 1. Great. 15 microliters. We're gonna do exactly what you did on your practice. Put the auger side down, lift it up. 3 little spots, completely dispense that 15 microliters. Put the plate, Petri dish plate back on, the top on, as we see there, just to keep things sterile in between manipulations. Grab your sterile toothpick, put the top back on to keep those toothpicks sterile, and now we're going to spread those 3 spots across that area of sample number 1. Great! I'm going to continue that for all the samples. After you're done with a sample, put it in a different place in the rack. There you go, so you know you've done it, and you won't get confused then, samples 1 through 8. When you're all done, let's say we've plated them all, good. You're going to take your 2 plates and stack them one on top of the other. If you would, please put the T plate on top of the MT plate, and this is auger side up. That's to avoid condensation, really raining in on your Petri dish while it's incubating. Take some masking tape, and you're going to tape those together so it's easy for you to find both your samples together when you come back to lab in 48 hours. There you go. T plate up, auger side up, and they're taped together. 48 hours is when you come back, because then you want to assess what's grown and what hasn't. We'd like to forewarn you about some common mistakes that can happen in this lab. One common mistake is not realizing that the Petri dishes are a little bit delicate and soft, and it's easy to gouge them. So here we're pipetting the 15 microliters of sample onto the plate, and you could gouge it with your tip as you're drawing across. Oh my gosh, you're gouging it like crazy, and in fact your tip wasn't even supposed to go all the way across like that. Remember, we're going to spot just a few spots with the tip, and try not to gouge into the Petri dish. Another way that gouging can easily happen is maybe you do the dispensing of your sample with the P20 just fine, and you did no gouging, which is lovely. A few spots going across. Great. But then remember, there's a second part of this, and that is that you're going to take a sterile toothpick and swipe that over those 3 spots and bring them all together. Oh, but if that sterile toothpick is going in, whoa, is going going right into that soft agar, we have a problem. So what's going to happen? The cells are going to grow inside the agar and you won't be able to count them. So we have a couple solutions. Look at your plate. You've got an extra space down at the bottom. You could relabel that and use that in place of one where you had a gouging problem. Alternatively, just ask your instructor for an extra plate and you can start over. No problem. Another problem is if we crossed borders on your plate. You've got your nicely labeled plate. So let's say we're on to samples 3 and 4 here. And instead of staying within your line of sample 4, you actually went over the borders between 3 and 4. And you could do that either with the tip here as shown or with a toothpick, and that's a problem as well. So again, redo your sample or ask for an extra plate. Another possibility is we have 8 samples, right? That's a lot for us to deal with, so you want to be sure you keep track of your samples and don't get them mixed up. So there we have them in a nice order, 1, 2, 3, 4 through 8. And so a common way to keep track of things is after you finish with sample 1, let's say we've gone through the whole thing, put that back on your rack in a different place, behind. And then you know, oh, I'm done with sample 1. And you won't pick that up and replate it by mistake. Great. A final common mistake is forgetting a little bit about sterile technique. So we want to keep the plates closed with their lids on as much as possible throughout the lab. Please don't find yourself keeping that lid off for extended periods. Close the plate back up in between your samples, like so. Also, same with the pipette tips. Keep that box closed as much as possible. You got to open it when you grab the tip, but then keep it closed. Here's an example of a few streaks that you might observe when you come back to get your plate 2 days after your lab. Do come back within 48 hours or you'll be in trouble. Your plates won't have observable results. Here shown on the bottom of the plate is a streak that has too many to count colonies. We also call it a lawn. It's just got way too many colonies, so they've all come together. The middle shows nothing. Really, there's no growth there, and so you call that no growth. The top has individual colonies, and those are countable, and you will use the colony counter to get a quantitative assessment of that. Now, there are some issues that can arise when we have, for example, on the left-hand side here, you see some of the streaks coming together. We showed that to you as a common mistake. If you see that, please just note that in your results. Here's an example of a plate that has gone too long in the incubator. You forgot to come in after 2 days, even though we reminded you, and that's sad. But what you see at the bottom here are colonies that have gotten too large because they've grown for too long and they've bumped into one another. That will be hard to count accurately, but you will do your best and note the number of hours that they were grown so that they were overgrown. The middle line here shows just 2 colonies. Count them 2. 1, 2. So you would note something like that. That is not 0, it's 2. You can see in that middle line that there's a background, a pale background of where you did plate cells, and most of them did not grow, but 2 emerged. When you come into lab on day 2 to assess your plates, you're going to use this colony counter to count any streaks that have separated countable colonies. So to start, you turn the colony counter on. That's the gray unit in the back. If you need it, there are the instructions there to walk you through. The colony counter is in the front. You're going to turn on the light for that. That's in the back. And you're ready to roll. Take your Petri dish and put it agar side down in the colony counter. Now, the way this counter works is using electrical current through the agar itself. So you have to take the electrode, which we're not counting with, and just stick it into the agar in a clear spot on the agar. That's so that the current can flow between that electrode and your counter, which we're now going to pick up, the counting tool. And with that, you're going to poke that, let's just do some practice first, in a clean spot in the agar. You can be looking through the magnifying glass or not, and you can hear the counter clicking every time he pokes into that agar. And we get a count on the clicker that's accurate for every poke. All right, for looking at your colonies, you're going to look through the magnifier, and yes, he reset the counter, and we're going to count each colony that we see. Hard to see here with these tiny colonies, But there you go. Make sure you hear a click every time you put the counter in. Okay, and then when you're done, you record the total number in your lab notebook so that you know exactly how to quantitate your results. These plates are now a mess. You've just poked them a lot, so they get thrown away. Just take them and throw them into the trash bin for Petri dishes that's right nearby. You're done until your analysis happens.